The scorching sun bore down on her broken body, the swirling desert winds whispering a single, unyielding truth: she should not have survived. Yet fate had other ideas. Caroline Weston, once a gentle rancher's wife, now lay on the edge of oblivion until a dark figure emerged through the haze. An infamous gunslinger, rumored to be colder than the steel he carried, lifted her into his arms with a startling tenderness. Little did she know their fateful encounter would ignite secrets, danger, and a love that would echo across the lawless plains. And in those shifting sands, destiny began to stir. The desert's fierce winds slashed the hot air in that sweltering summer, leaving fine grains of sand coating every surface they touched. Each day felt like walking straight into a furnace. On the outskirts of what travelers called the Devil's Corridor, hidden away in a small ranch named Westwood, lived Caroline Weston. She was just 29, yet life's merciless lash had already struck her more times than most endured in a lifetime. Caroline had come from a modest background. Her father, Clyde Harlow, was a traveling preacher who passed from one prairie town to another, offering rousing sermons from a portable pulpit. Caroline's mother died when she was only 8. Not wishing to burden her father as he carried out his mission, Caroline learned early how to cook, sew, tend to animals, and keep her spirits alive in lonely places. When she turned 17, she caught the eye of John Weston, a rancher's son, who had a brilliant if somewhat mischievous laugh. John inherited a patch of land that, while modest, held promise if tended by hard-working hands. Together they built a life from the dusty soil, raising a few cattle and goats while growing enough feed to keep them through the harsh winters. Despite the dryness of the land, the ranch thrived in its own way, thanks to Caroline's nurturing and John's never-ending optimism. They had a son named Duncan, a bright-eyed boy who chased tumbleweeds for fun. The color of his hair was straw blonde, like his father's. Caroline could hardly believe how blessed she was whenever she gazed upon her family. Those were the last sweet memories of her old life. A fever took John abruptly. They thought it was just a seasonal sickness, but the desert was unforgiving. No doctor was available for miles, and the traveling physician arrived too late, finding John already lost to the delirium. Caroline was left alone with Duncan, just 7 years old, and a ranch that needed constant care. That was only the first blow. Whispers around the territory warned of new bandits in the area, desperate men on the run who found easy prey among the solitary ranches near Devil's Corridor. Caroline had heard the rumors, but never expected to stare them in the eye. Until the day they arrived. They galloped in at sundown. Dust clouds rolled behind their ragged horses. The first bullet they fired was a warning shot, shattering the wooden fence. The second bullet stole the life of a ranch hand who'd come to check on the commotion. Caroline rushed out, heart-pounding Duncan clinging to her skirt. The bandits, led by a man who called himself Sergio Nightwolf Morales, demanded money. "Pay up or we'll torch your place," they sneered. Caroline didn't have enough to satisfy them. She offered the little she had to silver candlesticks and a meager lockbox with John's last earnings. It wasn't nearly enough. Nightwolf's men took everything of value, including saddles, supplies, and even some of the livestock. Then they did something far crueler. They took Duncan. Chaos exploded. Caroline fought them like a woman possessed, claws out, screams tearing through her throat. But Nightwolf's men pinned her down. She caught a glimpse of Duncan's terrified face as he was dragged away onto a horse. Then Nightwolf struck Caroline with the butt of his rifle. Her world exploded into blackness laced with the copper tang of her own blood. When she woke, her body was bouncing on a horse, bound and gagged. Several hours later, they dumped her in the desert with no canteen, no horse, no shade, just the scorching sun. She was left there to die. And for a moment, Caroline wondered if she should give in. Her sweet boy was gone. Her husband was gone. The ranch was likely ruined. The desert stretched infinitely in every direction, swallowing hope. But in the darkest hour, Caroline thought of Duncan, his wide, teary eyes. A spark of life flickered in her battered body. Determined to survive and see him again, she staggered through the dunes. Her parched lips cracked, and her mind wandered in delirious circles. Each step was an agony, each breath a ragged plea to a merciless sky. She didn't know how far she walked before her vision blurred again. She collapsed, feeling the hot sand scald her cheek. A silhouette loomed over her, too blurred to make out. Was it another bandit finishing the job? She tried to move, but her muscles refused. Everything dimmed. When Caroline next opened her eyes, she found herself in a small cabin. The rough wooden ceiling was layered with smoke stains. Daylight seeped through cracks in the walls. A stranger's voice, low and rumbling, spoke her name. She realized she was lying on a pallet covered with a worn blanket. Her wounds had been cleaned, and her thirst somewhat quenched. "Drink," came the voice. A tin cup was pressed to her lips. Water trickled down her throat. She blinked, struggling to focus. Who had saved her? A man sat by her bedside, broad shoulders, dust-caked attire, and a wide-brimmed hat resting on his knee. He had a pistol at his belt and a jagged scar along his jaw. Something about him was dangerous, almost menacing. Yet there was concern in his dark eyes. He offered her more water. She drank desperately. "I found you half dead," he said after a long pause. "You got a name. Caroline." "Caroline Weston," she managed. He nodded. "Name's Jackson Holt. Some call me the Steel Eye. Don't matter much to me." Caroline had heard legends of a gunslinger named Jackson Holt. He was an outlaw to some, a vigilante to others, a man rumored to have killed at least 30 men, including a few Pinkerton agents. Some said Wyatt Earp himself once tried to bring Holt to justice, but Holt disappeared into the desert like a ghost. Caroline's heart hammered. She didn't know if she was in more danger now than before. But he had saved her. Why? She tried to lift herself onto her elbows, wincing at her bruises. "Thank you," she whispered. Holt offered a single nod. His expression was guarded but not cruel. "You were left out there to die. I don't usually interfere in folks' business, but I ain't the devil. Found you on my way to Santa Fe," he said quietly. Caroline's thoughts spun Duncan. She had to find him. Panic shot through her. She tried to get up fully, but the pain in her ribs doubled her over. "Easy, Holt," commanded voice, firm. "You're in no shape to ride. Got some broken ribs, best I can tell. Cuts and bruises all over. You're lucky to be alive." She swallowed a sob, recalling the bandits. "My son." She choked. "They took him." Jackson's eyes narrowed. "Bandits." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "They killed my ranch hand, robbed us, and dragged my boy away. Left me out there in the desert. Please, he's 7 years old. Please help me get him back." Another man might have turned away from such trouble, but Holt surprised her. He stared into the distance for a few moments, as if weighing something on invisible scales, then turned back. "I can't promise you a damn thing," he said bluntly. "But if there's a chance to find your boy, I'll do what I can." Caroline clung to those words like a lifeline. She let out a shaky breath, tears cutting through the dust on her face. "Thank you," she repeated, her voice trembling under the weight of desperation and gratitude. He adjusted his hat and left her to rest, shutting the cabin door behind him. Alone, the tears flowed freely. A battered widow, alone in a savage land, forced to rely on a man with a gunfighter's reputation. She shuddered at the thought. Yet even as fear swirled, a small piece of hope lit a spark in her soul. 3 days passed in that cramped cabin. Each morning, Jackson brought water from a nearby creek and cooked up beans or jerky. Caroline's injuries began to heal. Her bruises turned purple, then yellow, and the swelling around her ribs subsided enough for her to move with minimal agony. She noticed how he said little, as if words were a commodity. She also noticed how everything about him spoke of a man on the run, the watchful glance at the horizon, the way he always kept a pistol within arm's reach, the restless nights when he paced outside, scanning for threats. Despite his silence, he began to share bits of his story, perhaps out of some unspoken need for Caroline to trust him. He had once been a deputy in a small border town, until one day an influential rancher's son assaulted a young woman. Holt intervened, and in the scuffle, the rancher's son was killed. Afraid of the rancher's power, the local sheriff turned on Holt, accusing him of murder. Holt fled, and rumor turned him into a monster. Some said he hunted lawmen, while others believed he championed the weak. Truth lay somewhere in between. On the 4th evening, Caroline eased outside with careful steps, cradling her aching ribs. Sunset painted the desert sky in hues of orange and purple. She found Holt checking his horse's hooves and asked quietly, "How far to the nearest town?" He shrugged. "Nearest real town is Bentwood, about a day's ride from here. But you ain't ready for riding yet. I can't risk putting you on a horse if your ribs snap." Caroline nodded, lips pressed tight. She knew it was madness, but she couldn't wait. Duncan's life was at stake. "What about my son?" she asked softly. "Shouldn't we be looking?" Holt's dark gaze flicked to her. "I've been thinking on that. Bandits, especially ones that savage, don't linger in one spot too long. They'd either try to sell your boy or force him into some chore. If you want to stand a chance at rescuing him, you'll need more than me." Caroline's brow furrowed. "Who else? My ranch is destroyed. I've got no money, no friends who'd be willing to cross these devils." Holt hesitated, shifting his weight. "I know a man named Wyatt Earp. He's mostly known around Dodge City, Tombstone, places in that range. We crossed paths a long time ago. He might be able to help, though he might also want to arrest me if he sees me. Man's got an unwavering sense of the law." Caroline looked away, the dryness of her eyes replaced by the sting of unshed tears. "I don't care who arrests who. I just want my boy." Holt nodded solemnly. "We'll ride out in 2 days. You need at least that much time to heal up more. Then we head to Bentwood, see if we can gather any leads. It's closer than Tombstone and folks talk. Maybe some rumor can help us track those varmints." She wanted to protest, but recognized the truth. She was in no shape to travel. That night, the desert wind howled around the cabin, stirring the old timbers. Caroline lay awake, hounded by nightmares of her son's screams. She found herself silently praying for an ally in the wide, ruthless expanse of the frontier. Though she never thought she'd trust a gunslinger, she had no choice. 2 days later, they set out at dawn. Holt mounted his dark bay mare, Shadow, and Caroline rode behind him on a borrowed buckskin named Amber. The horse was older, gentler an animal that once belonged to a traveller Holt had encountered under uncertain circumstances. Caroline chose not to ask further. She merely offered Amber a soothing pat on the neck, trying to calm her nerves. They rode slowly across the parched land. Swirling dust devils occasionally whipped across their path. The sun was relentless, but Holt ensured they had canteens filled and minimal but sufficient supplies. Caroline's ribs still hurt, and her shoulders ached. She gritted her teeth, determined not to slow them. Holt rode in silence, mostly scanning the horizon. The occasional crack of gunfire far in the distance reminded them how lawless these territories could be. More than once, they had to steer clear of suspicious-looking horsemen or drifting riders who might have had trouble on their minds. Towards dusk, on the second day, they reached Bentwood, a meager cluster of buildings huddled around a dusty main street. A tattered sign read, "Welcome to Bentwood Population, 237. The saloon was the busiest place, light spilling from its doors onto the street. Across from it stood a general store, a dilapidated livery stable, and a run-down hotel. Holt led Caroline to the Bentwood Hotel. Its faded sign hung askew, squeaking in the breeze. Inside the proprietor, a sagging man named Rutherford Cole glanced up. He froze when he recognized Holt, eyes darting nervously to the revolver on Holt's hip. "Well, if it isn't Jackson Holt," he croaked. "You sure you ain't here to shoot up the place?" Holt simply frowned. "We're here for a room and information." Cole's gaze slipped to Caroline, battered and dusty, but with determined eyes. He cleared his throat. "Information, huh? Best place for that is the saloon, friend, not my desk." Caroline was exhausted, her legs shaking from the ride. Holt slid a few coins across the counter. "We'll take 2 rooms," he said, ignoring Cole's insinuations. "Got only one left with a single bed." Cole replied, not meeting Holt's gaze. "And there's a cot in the corner." Caroline's cheeks burned. Holt gave a shrug. "We'll make do." They climbed the rickety stairs to a cramped room. Caroline found the bed, as Holt had promised, plus a small cot. It was far from luxurious, but after the endless desert nights it felt like heaven to Caroline. She sank onto the bed, stifling a groan from her bruised ribs. Holt set down their bags and turned to her. "You rest. I'll see about that saloon. See if anybody knows about bandits who roam near Devil's Corridor." Before leaving, he paused at the door. "Lock it behind me. Don't open unless you hear me call your name." Caroline nodded, grateful for his caution. She dragged herself up to lock the door, then collapsed. The swirling mixture of fear for Duncan and her physical pain drained her energy. Within minutes, she slipped into an uneasy sleep. She woke to a hushed voice, calling her name. Startled, she leapt up, heart pounding. It was Holt. She opened the door, letting him in. His face was grim. "Found a lead," he said, removing his hat. "Some traveling merchants said they saw a group of bandits with a young boy a few days back, heading southwest. Might be the same outlaws that took your son." Caroline's breath hitched. "Did they say if he was alive?" Holt's expression softened. "He was. That's all I know. We might have a chance." He took a moment, settling on the cot. "But I also got wind that a couple of Pinkerton men are in town. They're looking for me." He lowered his voice. "We need to leave at dawn. If they catch wind I'm here, we'll have bigger trouble." "Then we leave," Caroline said firmly, ignoring the pulse of pain in her side. "I can't lose any more time." That night she barely slept, torn between renewed hope and the fear that Duncan might slip further from her grasp. Morning came with a pale sun. Caroline and Holt gathered their few belongings, then headed downstairs. As they paid Cole for the night, Holt's body went rigid. Two men stood by the entrance wearing dusty suits and hats too fine for bentwood. They parted like wolves closing in. Jackson Holt, one said, his voice as cool as ice water. "Alan Pinkerton sends his regards." He tipped his hat in a mock greeting. "We'd like a word." Holt's entire frame tensed, but his hand didn't go for his gun. Caroline felt her mouth go dry, heart racing. The Pinkertons had a fearsome reputation for hunting wanted men relentlessly. "I'm traveling with a friend," Holt said, carefully stepping slightly in front of Caroline. "She's in trouble. Let me help her, and we can settle our business another time." One Pinkerton agent, a rail-thin man with a hooked nose, smirked. "Not sure that's how it works. See, we've got a warrant here, says you're a murderer and a thief. Might even be more crimes we haven't pinned on you yet." Holt's jaw tightened. "I was framed. If you know Alan Pinkerton, you'd know that. The real criminals are out there. If you just—" "That's enough." The other agent snapped, drawing a short-barreled revolver. The tension was palpable. Caroline's hand instinctively reached out for Holt's sleeve. In that moment, Rutherford Cole, perhaps fearing a gunfight in his establishment, yelped, "Gentlemen, if you must do this, take it outside. I don't want bullet holes in my—" His plea was cut short by the hooked-nose agent's snarl. "Shut your mouth." He stepped forward, gun aimed at Holt's chest. "Drop your weapon, Holt!" Caroline's mind whirled. If Holt was taken in, what would become of Duncan? Holt raised his hands slowly, letting his revolver clatter to the ground. "Don't do this," he said, voice tight with anger. "I promised to help find a boy. He's been kidnapped. If you want to do your job, help me rescue him. Then I'll go with you." The Pinkerton sneered. "You don't give the orders here." He reached into his coat, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. Mondaio. Behind. Suddenly the door to the street burst open. A figure rushed in, breathless, a merchant from last night, eyes wide. "Help! Bandits attacked the stagecoach just outside town. They robbed us and shot the driver. We need help." The Pinkerton agents froze. Holt's eyes flicked to Caroline. The moment was pure chaos, and Holt seized it. He lunged for his gun on the ground, scooping it up in a swift, practiced motion. The Pinkertons swore, but Holt already had them covered. "Now you two," he growled, backing towards the door, Caroline at his side. "This isn't personal. You want me, fine. But right now there are folks out there dying because of scum. You want to see justice done? Then go chase them." He glanced at Caroline, who nodded, and they slipped out into the street, horses waiting at the hitching post. Gunshots erupted behind them as the Pinkertons tried to fire, but they missed. Holt and Caroline galloped away in a cloud of dust, the saloon doors swinging in their wake. They sped southwest, hearts pounding, determined to catch the bandits rumored to be traveling that route. Caroline clung to Amber's reins, her ribs screaming with every jolt. Yet adrenaline numbed the worst of it. She had a single thread of hope. Maybe the bandits who just robbed the stagecoach were tied to the same gang that had taken Duncan. For hours they rode in grim silence. The scorching sun rose higher, mocking their pursuit. They came upon the site of the stagecoach robbery, a grisly scene of bullet-riddled wood, scattered luggage, and the driver's body. The bandits were long gone. A few shell-shocked passengers huddled in the shade. Holt dismounted and approached. "You see a boy with them? 7 years old. blonde hair. One woman shook her head. They took our valuables. Shot the driver. Didn't see no child. Caroline's shoulders sagged. Another dead end. But Holt pressed. How many men, maybe 5, answered another passenger, trembling. They said they were heading deeper into New Mexico territory. One wore a bandana with a wolf's head drawn on it. Caroline's eyes snapped up. Night Wolf, she whispered, remembering the moniker Night Wolf Morales. That was a lead. If Morales was close, so was Duncan. They left the rattled survivors with what little comfort they could offer, and continued onward. With the bandits possibly only a few hours ahead, Holt urged the horses on, aware that the Pinkertons might also be on their trail. The day stretched on, the heat intensifying. Caroline's throat felt like sandpaper. Each time she looked at Holt, she saw the same determination etched into his face. By late afternoon, they found tracks that suggested multiple horses had diverged from the main trail into a rocky canyon. They followed with caution, weaving between towering boulders. Eventually they spotted smoke in the distance, curling lazily into the sky. Holt signaled Caroline to dismount and tie up the horses behind a rock formation. They approached on foot, each step measured and silent. From a vantage point, they peered down into the canyon's basin. There, in a makeshift camp around a fire, sat 5 men. One wore a familiar bandana decorated with a wolf's head. Night Wolf Morales. Caroline's heart pounded. She scanned the camp. No sign of Duncan, but a small bedroll at the periphery looked child-sized. Before she could think, she tried to stand, but Holt pulled her down, shaking his head fiercely. "Don't do anything reckless," he hissed. "They'll kill him if we rush in." Her lips trembled. "Is he there?" "He must be," Holt whispered back. "But we have to be clever." They waited until the sky darkened, the bandits growing relaxed around their fire. Bottles were passed. Laughter occasionally rang out. It felt like an eternity for Caroline, every moment wondering if Duncan was cold or hurt or frightened. Around midnight, 2 men got up to check the perimeter, leaving 3 around the fire. Holt quietly explained his plan. They would wait for the perimeter men to circle away, then ambush the camp. Caroline was to stay hidden until Holt subdued whoever was awake, then she'd help grab Duncan. Her heart thudded. She was no gunslinger, but if it meant saving her son, she'd do anything. Holt handed her a small Derringer pistol, quickly showing her how to cock it. "Only if you're cornered," he said with intense eyes. She nodded, swallowing hard. They crept closer under the moonlight, the canyon walls rising like silent witnesses. A coyote howled in the distance, a chilling serenade. The 2 guards eventually circled out of sight. Holt crouched behind a fallen boulder, raising his revolver. He fired 2 quick shots. One bandit by the fire cried out, collapsing. The other 2 scrambled for their guns. Holt fired again, hitting a second. The 3rd dove behind a crate, returning fire bullets ricocheting off the rocks. Caroline covered her mouth to stifle a scream as sparks flew. Night Wolf Morales emerged from a tent, cursing. He fired into the darkness at Holt's position. Holt ducked, scanning for an opening. Caroline saw movement at the edge of the camp, a child's shape. Duncan. He was huddled, bound at the wrists. Another shot rang out, tearing into the boulder near Caroline. She bit her lip, fighting panic. Suddenly, one perimeter guard appeared behind Holt's flank, raising a rifle. Caroline's heart lurched. Without a second thought, she aimed the Derringer and squeezed the trigger. The shot was deafening in her ears. The guard's rifle fired wide as he staggered, collapsing into the dust. She had done it. She had saved Holt. Her hands shook violently. Holt used the distraction to surge forward. He crashed into Morales, the two men grappling. Caroline skirted around the chaotic brawl, heading straight for Duncan. The boy's eyes widened with disbelief and relief as he recognized his mother. Tears blurred Caroline's vision while she fumbled to cut his ropes. "Mama," he choked out. Voice cracked from dehydration. Caroline hugged him close, sobbing with equal parts agony and joy. Gunshots echoed behind them. She turned to see Holt and Morales rolling on the ground. Nightwolf was bigger, but Holt was quicker. They traded heavy blows, each man grunting in pain. The half-dead bandit behind the crate managed a desperate shot, the bullet grazing Holt's shoulder, but he didn't flinch. Holt drove a fist into Morales's gut, then snatched his pistol from the ground. "Back off!" Holt barked, pressing the gun to Morales's chest. The bandit spat blood, glaring daggers. "Where's the rest of your crew?" Morales snarled. "Kill me if you want." "They'll find you," Holt sneered. "Maybe. But you're done terrorizing folks." Then he cracked Morales across the temple with the pistol's grip, knocking him unconscious. The last remaining bandit sank to his knees, hands in the air, wounded and trembling. With Duncan freed, Caroline rushed to check his injuries. He was thin, bruised and exhausted, but alive. She smoothed his hair, tears staining her cheeks. "It's over," she whispered, kissing his forehead. Holt tied up the surviving bandits. 2 had died in the crossfire, their bodies slumped around the camp. Caroline tried not to look. Her heart hammered with the knowledge that she had taken a man's life tonight. But it was for Duncan, her precious boy. They rummaged the camp for supplies. Holt took the bandits' guns, bullets, and any valuables. He found a stolen silver pocket watch engraved with the name Jameson Cunningham, a real name known in the territory, likely some traveler robbed weeks ago. Holt set it aside, muttering that he'd try to return it if possible. At dawn, the bandits, still conscious, stirred. Nightwolf Morales glared at Holt, but his arms were bound. "You're an even bigger fool than they say," he spat. "You'll never get away from the Pinkertons, you know." Holt ignored him. Instead, he turned to Caroline. "We should head out. If we bring these scum to the nearest sheriff, we might buy ourselves some goodwill, maybe keep the Pinkertons off my back for a bit." Caroline nodded, holding Duncan tight. The boy clung to her face, buried against her shoulder. She stroked his hair, vowing to protect him at any cost. They reached a small frontier settlement called Rattlesnake Ridge by midday. Holt wasted no time marching the tied-up outlaws to the sheriff's office, Caroline and Duncan trailing warily. Sheriff Beauregard "Beau" Lowry was a broad-shouldered man with a moustache that curled dramatically. He regarded Holt with suspicion. "You bring trouble to my town, stranger." Holt gestured to the prisoners. "Name's Jackson Holt. These men attacked a ranch, kidnapped this boy, robbed a stage. We've put a stop to them. Might want to lock 'em up." Lowry's gaze flicked to Caroline. She mustered her courage. "They raided my ranch, stole my son. Mr. Holt saved us." Nightwolf spat on the floor, leering at Caroline. "Sheriff, I'll pay you double if you let me and my boys go. We can be real friendly." Lowry scowled. "You shut your mouth." He motioned for his deputy to place the bandits in cells. "We don't do bribes here." Then he turned back to Holt. "I've heard your name, Holt. Some folks say you're wanted. Others say you're a hero to the helpless. Which is it?" Holt shrugged as though the question barely mattered. I'm just a man. I do what's necessary. Lowry grunted. This territory's short on law these days. Good or bad, you've helped bring in these outlaws. That's enough for me. He paused, eyes narrowing. Course, if the Pinkertons come knocking, that's their business. Holt returned the man's steady gaze. I understand. Then in a quieter tone, they probably will. Satisfied for now. Lowry jerked his head. You can find lodging in the old bunkhouse behind the saloon if you plan to stay. It's not much, but it's cheap. I'll wire the marshal about these bandits. Should get a reward or something for you, maybe help the lady fix her ranch. Caroline's eyes widened. A reward could make all the difference. She could rebuild Westwood, secure Duncan's future. She murmured her thanks, overwhelmed by relief. Over the next few days in Rattlesnake Ridge, Caroline and Duncan rested. She acquired clean clothes and some medical supplies to further tend her still-healing wounds. With the sheriff's endorsement, Holt was momentarily left in peace. He spent most days working odd jobs around town, hauling freight mending fences to earn a bit of money while they waited for news from the marshal. Duncan was quieter than before, traumatized by his ordeal. Yet Caroline saw glimpses of the old spark in his eyes, especially when he was near Holt's horse Shadow. Holt would calmly show him how to brush her coat and feed her treats. It seemed to soothe Duncan's nightmares. Caroline watched Holt with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. She had judged him early on as a dangerous outlaw. Yet he had shown her and Duncan nothing but kindness. In quiet moments her heart fluttered uncomfortably, remembering how he had protected them. She told herself it was only gratitude, but a deeper warmth stirred inside her. It was near sunset one evening, after she and Holt finished supper in the bunkhouse, that she found the courage to speak her mind. "Jackson," she said, softly. He turned, eyebrows raised. They were alone in the dusty lamplit space. She clasped her hands suddenly, unsure how to proceed. "I can't ever repay what you did. You saved both of us. When I think of how close I came to losing Duncan..." Her voice broke. Holt's gaze dropped, and he shifted uncomfortably. Just did what had to be done. She stepped closer, the lamplight dancing on her features. "You could have left me in that desert. You could have ignored my pleas for help. But you didn't." He met her eyes. Silence stretched between them. Outside, the night insects chirped softly. Finally, he cleared his throat. Voice low. "I was left for dead once, too. Long time ago. Couldn't turn my back on someone in that same position." Caroline's eyes shone. "I'm sorry that happened to you," she whispered. Without thinking, she reached out to place a gentle hand on his arm. He stiffened, but then his tense posture eased. His hand covered hers, calloused fingers warm. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Loss, pain, determination, and a spark of forbidden connection. She found her heart thrumming with an intensity she hadn't felt since John's death. Guilt twinged inside her for feeling anything at all, but she couldn't deny the stirring. 5 days after they arrived in Rattlesnake Ridge, the telegraph office received word the federal marshal was on his way to collect the bandits and distribute reward money. That same afternoon, the Pinkertons arrived. Once more, the tension in the dusty air rose to a breaking point. Caroline, Duncan, and Holt were in the general store when the Pinkertons rode up the main street. One recognized Holt through the window. "Stop, Holt!" the agent bellowed, stepping off his horse hand on his pistol. Townsfolk scurried into doorways. Holt placed his body between the Pinkerton and Caroline. "We don't need more trouble here," he said evenly. The agent, a lean man with a cold stare, sneered. "Alan Pinkerton, once you brought in dead or alive. Hand over your gun, or you'll be leaving in a pine box." Before Holt could reply, Sheriff Lowry strode onto the boardwalk, rifle in hand. "Hold it right there," he barked. "This man helped bring down Morales and his gang. We're waiting on the marshal." The Pinkerton glared. "This is not your jurisdiction. We have federal authority." Lowry cocked the rifle. "Do you have a federal warrant? If so, the marshal can handle it when he arrives. Until then, you try anything here, you'll be answering to me." It was a standoff. Then the second Pinkerton, the one with the hooked nose from Bentwood, approached. "Easy," he said, raising his hands placatingly. "No sense turning this town into a battlefield. Let's wait on the marshal. Then we'll see what's what." The cold-eyed agent spat in the dirt, but holstered his weapon. "Fine. We'll wait." The next morning, the federal marshal, a grizzled man named Donovan Wade, arrived on the midday stage. He wore a dusty coat and carried an air of weary authority. Sheriff Lowry introduced him to everyone in his office. Marshal Wade eyed Holt with a mix of curiosity and caution. "So you're Jackson Holt. Heard a lot about you." Holt's face remained impassive. "Depends on who you ask, sir." Wade nodded slowly. He glanced at Caroline, who stood protectively behind Holt with Duncan by her side. "Ma'am, I understand you've got your boy back, thanks to this man." Caroline swallowed, stepping forward. "Yes, Marshal. He saved both of us. Nightwolf Morales would have killed me and done worse to my son if Mr. Holt hadn't intervened. He's no monster." Wade considered her words, rubbing his temple thoughtfully. "It's a messy situation. Pinkertons claim you killed a prominent rancher's son in cold blood. That boy's father pressed charges and put a bounty on your head." Holt stiffened voice, firm. "It wasn't murder. He was assaulting a woman he tried to kill me when I stopped him. The father twisted the law with his money and influence." Wade sighed. "It's not the first time a wealthy rancher manipulated the courts. I can't promise you'll walk free, but I can speak on your behalf if you cooperate with me." He looked to the side. "These bandits you brought in Morales's gang, that's no small catch. The territory's safer because of you." The Pinkerton with the cold stare interjected. "He's still under arrest, Marshal. If you won't do it, we will." Wade gave the agent a level stare. "You work for Pinkerton's agency, which is contracted by that rancher. I respect your private authority, but let's not forget the law in these parts rests with me. Mr. Holt will be placed under protective custody until we sort this out. In the meantime, the lady and her boy are free to go. Morales and his men will hang for their crimes." Caroline's eyes stung at the realization that just as they found a moment's respite, Holt would be taken. He shot her a glance, an odd tenderness flickering there. "If you can salvage your ranch with the reward, do it," he murmured. She swallowed back tears. "I can't just leave you." A flicker of a smile tugged at his lips. "Look after Duncan. That's all that matters." An unexpected moment of clarity struck Caroline. She had lost one good man to the desert's cruelty. She couldn't bear the thought of losing another to the tangled threads of corruption. Desperation brewed a risky plan. That evening, while Holt sat in the sheriff's spare cell, less a punishment and more protective custody, Caroline approached. Duncan was asleep in the bunkhouse under the watchful eye of a kind local woman. Caroline bribed the deputy with fresh biscuits to let her speak to Holt privately. He rose from the bench in the cell, meeting her eyes through the iron bars. "You shouldn't be here, Caroline." She grasped the bars. "Listen to me. I've been talking to the local pastor. He says if you were my husband, I could petition for your release under certain territory laws, particularly if I can prove you've got responsibilities to a family that depends on you." His eyes widened. "You can't be serious." She took a deep breath. "I know it sounds insane, but there's a provision in the Southwestern Territories. If a man is the sole provider for a widow and her child, the judge can postpone or dismiss certain charges until a formal trial in a higher court. If we're married, that might force the Pinkertons to back off, at least long enough for us to gather evidence to clear your name." Holt shook his head, torn. "I can't ask you to do that, Caroline. People will talk, and what if you end up tied to my fate?" She swallowed hard. "I'd rather be tied to you fighting for the truth than to watch you hang for crimes you didn't commit." She reached her hand through the bars, touching his cheek gently. If he were here, he'd want me to be happy. Life is too short out here to let fear and rumor dictate everything. You've risked everything for me for Duncan. Let me do the same." Silence fell between them. Holt wrapped his hand over hers, the rough warmth of his palm sending a shiver through her. Slowly he nodded. "All right. If that's truly what you want." She managed a shaky smile. "It is." By the next afternoon, Caroline had enlisted the help of Sheriff Lowry. The lawman was reluctant, but admitted it could help if the territory judge recognized Holt as a family man with obligations. Marshal Wade, though uneasy, allowed the ceremony under guarded conditions. The Pinkertons fumed but couldn't openly oppose it without defying the marshal and the sheriff together. So under a starlit sky with a weathered old pastor present, Caroline and Holt spoke their vows. Duncan stood close by, holding his mother's hand. A handful of curious townsfolk gathered around, some out of genuine support, others for the spectacle of seeing a wanted gunslinger wed to a widowed rancher. Holt wore his usual rugged attire, minus his weapons. Caroline had borrowed a simple white dress from the local seamstress. It was too large, pinned in place, but it glowed softly in the lamplight. The moment felt surreal, the hush of the desert all around them. The pastor asked them to exchange rings. Holt had no ring, so Caroline slipped a small silver band from her own finger, her mother's old ring onto his hand. Her heart trembled at the significance. She saw the flicker of conflict in Holt's eyes. Part disbelief, part awe. They repeated the pastor's words, their voices steady, yet laden with unspoken emotion. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, the onlookers let out a respectful applause. Duncan looked up at Holt with wide eyes, then shyly wrapped his arms around Holt's waist. Holt placed a hand on the boy's head, a hesitant smile tugging at his lips. That night, Caroline and Holt took separate corners of the bunkhouse, while the sheriff allowed Holt temporary freedom from the cell. The official marriage certificate was recorded in the territory's register. Now Holt's legal status was intertwined with Caroline and Duncan. If the Pinkertons wanted him, they would have to petition a higher court, risking the attention of fairer judges who might not be swayed by the wealthy rancher's gold. The next few days were tense. The Pinkertons loitered in town, but they kept their distance, likely awaiting the same arrival of a circuit judge that the marshal had summoned. The presence of a newly formed family complicated matters. The Pinkertons needed more than a flimsy warrant if they wanted to forcibly take Holt. Meanwhile, Caroline found herself wrestling with a swirl of emotions. She was a widow, newly remarried to a man she hardly knew yet intimately trusted with her life. Every time she felt Holt's gaze on her, her heart fluttered. Each dawn she awakened to the knowledge that they were bound by the letter of the law, and perhaps something deeper. Holt spent his days rummaging for letters, testimonies, or any scrap of evidence to prove his innocence in that long-ago shooting. He wrote to a friend in Santa Fe asking for an affidavit from the woman he'd saved. If that letter arrived in time, it might exonerate him before the judge. Then came the day the Pinkertons decided they'd had enough waiting. Around noon, while Holt was fetching water from the well, the cold-eyed Pinkerton confronted him in the street. The agent blocked Holt's path, hand resting on his revolver. "You're coming with me," the agent hissed. "No more stalling. Your fancy wedding means nothing. My employer wants you, dead or alive." Townsfolk scattered, sensing danger. Holt stepped back, his own gun in its holster, tension coiling in his body. "We have a judge coming. There's a law for this. Don't be stupid." The Pinkerton smirked. "I'll kill you and claim you resisted arrest. No judge, no trial." He drew his gun in a flash. Holt sidestepped the bullet, whizzing by. Chaos erupted. Holt drew returning fire. The Pinkerton ducked behind a barrel, sending 2 more shots. Wooden splinters flew. Caroline, hearing the shots, rushed out of the bunkhouse. She saw Holt pinned behind the well. The second Pinkerton, with the hooked nose, hurried to join the fray, outflanking Holt. Desperation churned in Caroline's gut. She spied the sheriff's rifle leaning on a chair outside his office. She dashed for it, ignoring the risk. As the Pinkerton stepped forward to finish Holt, Caroline fired a warning shot into the air. "Stop!" she screamed, aiming the rifle at the agent's back. He spun, sneering. "Stay out of this, woman." He started to raise his gun, but Holt used the moment to lunge from behind the well. Holt fired once, hitting the Pinkerton in the shoulder. The agent dropped, groaning in pain. The second Pinkerton raised his weapon toward Caroline, but Sheriff Lowry tackled him from behind, slamming him to the ground. Marshal Wade, who had been riding back into town, galloped in at that moment, took one look at the scene, and dismounted with a curse. "Enough," he roared. "This ends now." The Pinkerton with the shoulder wound spat, cursing. "We were just doing our duty," Wade ordered Lowry to disarm them, glaring. "Your duty is to abide by the law. You fired first." Holt had every right to defend himself. The circuit judge, a stern woman named Judge Rebecca Alden, arrived that evening. She convened a makeshift hearing in the sheriff's office. Holt sat beside Caroline, while the Pinkerton agents, wounded and enraged, nursed their injuries under watch of the deputy. Evidence was presented. The testimony from Caroline described how Holt had saved her life and captured Morales's gang. Witnesses from the town corroborated that the Pinkertons shot first in the showdown. Then, at the last moment, a telegram arrived from Holt's friend in Santa Fe, containing a statement from the woman Holt had rescued years ago. She confirmed that the rancher's son assaulted her, that Holt acted to protect her life and his own. Judge Alden read the statement carefully, her expression darkening. She tapped her gavel. According to this, surtout, the rancher's son was the real criminal. "Holt, you have been a victim of false charges. I'm dismissing these claims against you in this territory, pending any contradictory evidence. As for the Pinkertons, you overstepped your bounds in the attempt to apprehend him. I'm ordering you to withdraw and make no further attempts until a federal judge in a proper court can make a final ruling. Given the evidence, I doubt any such ruling will go your way." The Pinkertons protested, but Alden's decision was final. They had no choice but to leave town battered and humiliated. As for Holt, he was free. Truly free for the first time in years. Caroline let out a trembling breath of relief, tears glistening. Duncan flung his arms around Holt's waist in childish joy. Holt ruffled the boy's hair, a rare grin lighting his features. Judge Alden offered a final word. "Mr. Holt, you've proven yourself an asset. I see you have a family here. If you choose, you can remain in Rattlesnake Ridge or return to Miss Weston's pardon, Mrs. Weston Holt's ranch. I suggest you make use of your freedom wisely." Within a week, the official reward money arrived for bringing in Morales's gang. It was enough to repair Westwood Ranch and invest in some new livestock. Caroline Holt and Duncan returned to the property. The damage was heartbreaking, shattered fences, scorched earth from the bandits' torches, but the house still stood. Holt immediately set to work, mending fences and rebuilding. Caroline ordered supplies from a neighboring town with the reward money. Duncan scampered around, chasing goats once more, though more quietly than before. Trauma lingered, but slowly normality crept back into their lives. One evening after a long day's labor, Caroline found Holt alone by the paddock, the sunset glowing red behind him. She walked over her steps, soft on the dusty ground. For a moment they stood side by side, watching the sky melt from gold to violet. "Thank you," she said quietly. He turned, brow furrowed. "For what?" She swallowed the lump in her throat. "For staying, for caring about Duncan, for being here, not just riding off to chase your next horizon. You could have left. Now that you're free of the Pinkertons, the entire West is open to you." He inhaled, the faint lines of his face softening. "I never really had a home, always wandering, haunted by that bounty. But here, with you two," he paused, then turned to meet her gaze. "I feel like I belong." A tear slid down her cheek. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his chest. He leaned in, pressing his forehead gently to hers. They stood there, breathing in the quiet closeness as the sun dipped below the horizon. Weeks passed in relative peace. The ranch slowly returned to life. Holt discovered he had a knack for horse training, a skill overshadowed by his reputation as a gunslinger. Caroline found solace in his presence, realizing that while her heart still grieved John, she had found another partner who understood the hardships of the frontier. But the Wild West rarely allowed for peaceful endings without another test. One evening, a neighbor, Mr. Farnsworth, rode up in a frenzy, warning of a revenge party from Morales's old associates. He had cousins, nephews, all criminals to the bone. Farnsworth gasped. "They aim to storm your ranch to avenge Morales." The threat was real. Caroline and Holt prepared for a final stand. They gathered supplies, readied firearms, and prayed Farnsworth's warning arrived in time to mount a defense. Sure enough, under the cover of a moonless sky, shadows approached. A half-dozen riders advanced, guns glinting. Holt and Caroline hid behind stacked crates near the barn, rifles ready. They had only minutes to plan. Duncan was hidden in the storm cellar. When the outlaws came within range, Holt fired a warning shot. "Turn around or you'll meet the same fate as Morales," he shouted, voice echoing off the ranch walls. Laughter answered him. Bullets whizzed, striking the barn door. Caroline steeled herself, returning fire. Holt's aim was deadly precise, dropping one man from his horse with a single shot. The outlaws scattered behind fences, peppering the house with bullets. Flames erupted as one tossed a torch onto a nearby haystack. Caroline's stomach lurched. They were trying to burn them out. She darted across the yard, ignoring the bullets snapping overhead, and stomped frantically on the flames. Holt provided cover fire, felling another attacker. The last 4 men advanced. Holt's eyes narrowed. He signaled Caroline to move to the other side of the barn, flanking them. They poured fire onto his position, oblivious to Caroline creeping behind them. She waited until they reloaded, then fired into the dirt at their feet, causing them to scatter. Holt used that moment to jump from cover, unleashing 3 shots in rapid succession. 2 more outlaws tumbled into the dust. With only 2 left and their mission crumbling, the men panicked. One dropped his weapon, mounted his horse, and fled into the night. The other tried to shoot, but Caroline's bullet ripped his weapon from his hand. Holt advanced, pinning the man to the ground. "You want to join Morales in prison or in the ground?" he growled. The terrified outlaw spat blood. Enough, I surrender," he rasped. Breathing heavily, Caroline lowered her rifle. Embers from the smouldering haystack drifted in the wind, the acrid smell of gunpowder mixing with smoke. Holt tied up the prisoner. The threat had passed, but their nerves remained frayed. The West, it seemed, didn't easily let go of its ghosts. In the aftermath of the failed assault, Holt and Caroline gazed around the ranch yard. Broken fences spent bullets, and the faint glow of dying embers testified to yet another close brush with death. Duncan peeked out from the storm cellar, tears streaming until he saw his mother wave him over. He ran into her arms. Holt wrapped them both in a sturdy embrace. No words were needed to convey the relief, the gratitude that they were all still alive. Over the next week, neighbors rallied, helping to repair the new damages. Gratitude replaced fear in Caroline's heart. She realized how quickly the community could come together when faced with ruthless violence. Even Farnsworth, who rarely had a kind word, offered some lumber and elbow grease. Months passed. The ranch returned to normal. Duncan ran freely again each day, healing the scars of his kidnapping. Caroline rose with the sun to tend crops. Holt broke colts in the corral, forging a new reputation as a skilled horseman rather than a deadly gun. Some folks still eyed him warily, but others came to respect him for driving off bandits and saving travelers who crossed the desert alone. Caroline watched the herd graze one golden afternoon, her heart warm with contentment. She felt a presence at her side, Holt. Without hesitation, she slipped her hand into his. He squeezed it gently. In the distance, birds soared over the desert skyline. "We've come a long way," Caroline murmured. Holt nodded. "That we have." She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. This land had tried to break her, tried to claim her life. But it also led her to this man, forging a bond stronger than any piece of paper. From widow left for dead to a bride standing on her own 2 feet, Caroline had found the resilience to overcome. Together they discovered that out of the fiercest storms, new life could bloom. Across the endless plains of the wild frontier, Caroline and Jackson forged a bond steeled by gunfire and sealed in faith. Fate had separated Caroline from everything she held dear, but in the crucible of desert heat and outlaw fury, she found salvation, love, and a second chance at family. Their story is a testament to how, even in the darkest moments, hope can blossom if we cling fiercely enough to it. If you found inspiration in their battle for survival and redemption, help keep this tale alive. Like the video, if it gripped your heart, share it with friends who yearn for stories of grit and romance, and subscribe to the channel for more epic journeys across the timeless landscapes of legend. Your support allows these stories to continue, echoing through the ages, just like Caroline's unbreakable spirit under the scorching western sun.